So Oliver, aka Kid Omni-Man, is the second child of Omni-Man, and he was born on planet Fraxa. The planet Fraxa was first discovered by Omni-Man. He found it a few weeks after abandoning his post on the planet Earth, and upon his arrival, he discovered that it was inhabited by a native race of aliens who called themselves Fraxans. The Fraxans were a mantis-like people that possessed a rare genetic quirk, as they aged from birth to maturity to death within 9 months, and their hierarchy was based on age, as the eldest being on the planet ruled over all. Upon his arrival, Nolan Grayson was quickly made ruler of their world, and after a period of adjustment, he took a native Fraxan named Andressa as his wife. Their union produced a son who would eventually be named Oliver. Soon, Nolan recognized that Fraxa's peace could not last, because when his people will discover that he had abandoned his post on Earth, they will come for him. In anticipation of this event, Nolan sent a Fraxan representative to the Earth to retrieve his older son, Mark Grayson, as he hoped that the two of them would be able to defend Fraxa from the impending Viltrumite assault. It wasn't long after Mark's arrival that a trio of Viltrumite warriors arrived, hell-bent on wreaking destruction upon the populace and apprehending Nolan. Oliver was hidden in a room with his mother until the Viltrumites arrived. Mark grabs Oliver and Andressa and takes them to a cave on Fraxa, but they are found by Lucan. Mark hands Oliver to Andressa, and while Lucan is distracted, Mark attacks him. He grabs Oliver and attempts to get away from Lucan, but Lucan catches up to the trio until Nolan intervenes. Mark lands with the two until Nolan arrives to take them back to the caves. So, Nolan sent Andressa and the infant Oliver into hiding, while he and Mark battled the invaders. Despite their best efforts, Nolan and Mark were eventually defeated by the invading Viltrumites. Nolan was taken into custody, while Mark was left battered and unconscious in the ruins of Fraxa. With their goal accomplished, the Viltrumites quickly lost interest in Fraxa and left its devastated people to their own devices. In Nolan's absence, Andressa assumed sole control of Fraxa's people. She oversaw the rebuilding of their society in the wake of the Viltrumite rampage. Between her guidance and Mark's raw power, they managed to rebuild enough of their infrastructure to allow Invincible to leave within a few months. During that time, Mark grew closer to his younger brother, and when Andressa begged him to bring Oliver back to his homeworld, he easily agreed. It was plain to see that despite the rapid rate Oliver was aging, his Viltrumite DNA would cause him to outlive everyone who cared about him on Fraxa, and he would end up alone on that planet. The Grayson brothers had a long and uneventful journey to Earth. Upon their arrival, Mark took Oliver to the one place he knew he would receive the care he needed. He took him to the home of his mother, Debbie Grayson. Debbie was shocked and hurt by the news that her estranged husband had started a new family. She initially could not believe the audacity of her son's request that she care for his child. But when Mark was called away by an emergency, she quickly bonded with the child and decided to raise him as her own. She even went so far as to actually name him, as up until this point, Oliver had gone nameless due to the Fraxan custom of allowing individuals to choose their own names upon maturity. It wasn't long thereafter when Mark told Cecil Stedman, his government handler, what had occurred upon Fraxa and revealed Oliver's presence on the planet Earth. Cecil was thrilled and even eager to have another being of Mark's caliber on his payroll. With the success that Debbie had already had in raising Mark, Cecil made necessary arrangements to keep young Oliver in her care. Later, Oliver and Debbie are captured and held hostage by Angstrom Levy, who is hoping to get revenge against Mark. Angstrom held Oliver, complimenting his purple skin, before throwing him to Debbie. After Mark returned from another dimension, Debbie and Oliver were taken to a hospital at the Pentagon. After Angstrom was killed, Oliver would play with trucks until a tutor named April Howsam arrived to tutor Oliver. While Mark was in space, Oliver was being tutored by April, and April was amazed at Oliver's skill development. April stated that he was only there less than a month and he is already at 4th grade math and 7th grade reading. Mark would arrive from Mars and Oliver would play catch with him. As they played catch, Oliver revealed to Mark that his power had finally surfaced. Mark's mum would find out about his powers and ask the duo to come inside, so it didn't take long, despite Debbie's reservations. for Oliver to adopt his own costume and begin to battle the Earth's criminal element. Oliver's burgeoning abilities easily eclipsed those of his Homo sapien counterparts and allowed him great success despite his inexperience. However, his emotional growth had failed to keep pace with his physical growth. His immaturity combined with his alien outlook led him to believe that other than a few exceptional cases, human life wasn't at all precious. One day, after hearing the news from his mother, Oliver heads to a nuclear base and fights the Mauler twins. While Mark is in space, Oliver breaks one of the Mauler's jaws and angers them. Oliver, not knowing his own strength, rushes to him and kills one of them. The other Mauler offers his surrender, but Oliver's punch kills him as well. Oliver, shocked at his own strength, attempts to justify his actions. Cecil arrives to comfort him until Mark arrives, realizing what Oliver done. Mark lectures Oliver on how human life is precious, with Oliver disagreeing. The two lived together in an awkward state of silence until Oliver eventually decided that the burgeoning ill will the two felt for one another wasn't worth it. He made a promise to Mark that he would attempt to see the humans in the same manner that he did, and moreover, that he would refrain from killing his opponents. Things settled down for a while, and Oliver settled into a comfortable rhythm of studying with his tutor April, spending time with Debbie, and fighting crime. Eventually, this pattern was disrupted when Angstrom Levy unleashed a score of corrupt extra-dimensional duplicates of his brother Mark. The alternate Invincibles wreaked havoc and waves of destruction planet-wide in an effort to discredit Mark. Presumably, they also were meant to weaken the Earth's defenses in preparation for Angstrom's final confrontation with the young hero. Oliver confronted one of the duplicates in Deborah's home and put up as good a fight as he could. To his dismay, the alternate Invincible was just as powerful as his brother. While their fight was fierce, it was brief, and Oliver came out on the losing end. Despite this, he wasn't seriously injured. Oliver was able to rally alongside his brother and make a final assault on Angstrom Levy when the villain was unprepared. Soon thereafter, while the Earth's forces were clearing away the wreckage of the Invincible War, the Viltrumite enforcer Conquest made Earth fall. Conquest demanded to know why Mark had not continued his father's work as he was ordered, and why the Earth's defenses were still in place. In response, Mark attacked the massive Viltrumite and quickly learned that despite the training and preparation he had undergone, he was still physically inferior to an angered Viltrumite. Oliver watched his brother receive a vicious beating from the berserk Viltrumite on the television for as long as he could. When he could not stand it any longer, Oliver raced into the sky in an attempt to help Mark. So Oliver intervenes after they stop moving. But Mark knocks Oliver away from Conquest and attempts to keep Oliver away from the battle. But Oliver comes back only to have his arm broken and is nearly beaten to death. He is then taken to the Pentagon to heal from his injuries, as he received a particularly nasty compound break of his arm and was very nearly torn in half during the course of the beating. Mark eventually defeated Conquest with aid from his girlfriend, Atom Eve. However, the two sustained life-threatening wounds during the battle. Oliver soon found himself in Mark's company in the military hospital, as he had been taken in immediately after his confrontation with Conquest. Despite the vast differences in their injuries, Oliver's less mature body needed a greater amount of time to heal. He spent several days in a military hospital biding his time until he had healed enough to leave and eventually help Mark with the cleanup efforts. Upon his recovery, life for Oliver once again settled back into his familiar pattern. He had several run-ins with villains from his brother's rogues gallery, including one of which ended up with his costume getting destroyed. When he approached Art the tailor for a new one, Art gave him a costume that was more suitable for his physical age. With his new costume, Oliver altered his heroic name from Kid to Young Omni-Man. Shortly thereafter, Nolan Grayson and Alan the Alien returned to the Earth. They attempted to recruit Mark in the war effort against the Viltrumites. Oliver was floored at Nolan's appearance and eagerly volunteered to help with the war effort. He desperately wanted to impress the man he had not seen since he was literally an infant. It was because of this that he was absolutely crushed when Nolan refused his offer and gave him a feeble reason for leaving him behind. Oliver protested immediately, but Nolan refused to change his mind until he saw the intense disappointment in Oliver's eyes. In that moment, Nolan's stance softened, and he extended the same invitation to Oliver that he had done with Mark. Pleased as punch, Oliver eagerly gathered what little belongings he would need and joined Mark and Nolan aboard the transport they would use to return to Coalition space. But soon, their spacecraft was intercepted and destroyed shortly after it entered Coalition space by Conquest. He had somehow gained the knowledge of their arrival and was sent to murder them before they could join the Coalition. Oliver, alongside both his father and brother, attacked Conquest and his pair of Viltrumite allies in a vain attempt to defeat them before their air ran out. Ultimately, Oliver proved to be too weak, and his brother was gravely wounded while saving his life from Conquest. Oliver and Nolan spent the next 9 months living on an unnamed and uncivilized planet in Coalition space. They waited for Mark to heal and awaken from the coma that he had fallen into immediately after Conquest's death. The time wasn't wasted though, as Nolan used the time to not only train his son in the ways of war, but also to get to know him better. Despite the unending boredom and barrenness of their surroundings, Oliver had the time of his life with his father. Mark eventually regained consciousness after 9 long months, fully healed and rested. With Mark back in action, the Grayson family took to the skies and flew directly to Talescria under their own power. They arrived just in time to turn the tide in a desperate battle between the besieged Coalition forces and their Viltrumite invaders. With the Graysons' arrival, the Viltrumites beat a rapid retreat. Less than a week passed before Oliver and several other high-powered members of the Coalition embarked on a desperate journey to Viltrum, the Viltrumite homeworld. They were attempting to ambush the retreating Viltrumite forces. Unfortunately, they were ambushed by the Viltrumites instead. During the pitched battle, Oliver managed to hold his own until he made the singular mistake of confronting the Viltrumite Grand Region on his own. Frag catches Oliver's punch and dismembers his arm while breaking Oliver's jaw, nearly killing him in the process. With that, Oliver lost consciousness and his part in the war was over. The Coalition transported Oliver to a hospital in Talescria. Oliver would be given a cybernetic jaw and arm while being placed in a stasis tank to accelerate his healing process. Oliver awakened weeks later in a Talescrian hospital. Despite the fact that he had been broken, battered, and oxygen deprived, he lived. His doctors informed him that his wounds were healing quite nicely. His skin had grown over his newly acquired artificial jaw and arm that he lost both to Frag during their battle. He was also informed that both his father and Mark had returned to Earth in pursuit of the Viltrumites. With nothing better to do, Oliver spent the next few weeks on Talescria convalescing and getting to know Alan the alien. The two became fast friends, with Alan watching out for Oliver as though he were his guardian. Nolan eventually returned to Talescria with his wife Debbie in tow. Thrilled to see his foster mother, Oliver spent some time with her until the Talescria News aired a live broadcast showing Omni-Man battling Alan. Oliver raced off to interfere in the battle, initially taking his father's side until he found out that Nolan was trying to prevent Alan from unleashing the Scourge virus on the Earth. After Alan explains that he will kill the Viltrumites and possibly sacrifice the human race, Oliver agrees with Alan. Nolan explains his side and how the Viltrumites will change because as Earth changed him. Oliver goes on to say that he has studied human history and humans are selfish. Nolan attempts to attack Oliver but stops after remembering his battle with Mark. So Alan knocks Nolan out, and with Omni-Man out of the way, Oliver returned to the Earth alongside Alan to dispose of the Earth-bound Viltrumites. They arrived in Earth space within 2 weeks of their departure. They were immediately confronted by Invincible, and when Alan explained his plan for defeating the Viltrumites, Mark immediately balked and refused to allow the two of them to infect the planet. Alan and Oliver expected Mark's response, and with that, a brief skirmish broke out until Grand Regent Frag arrived. Frag had been monitoring Earth space and had detected their arrival. Frag was too much of a deterrent, and with his arrival, the battle halted. Despite Oliver's protests, Frag and Alan bartered a peace treaty between the Coalition and the Viltrumites. Just as they were discussing terms, the Earthborn Guardians of the Globe arrived and attempted to take everyone present into custody. While Invincible, Frag and Alan were distracted by the humans, Oliver made a rash decision. He flashed through space and grabbed the weaponized Scourge virus and raced towards the Earth. His brother intercepted him before he could unleash the virus, and the two briefly struggled over the weapon. During their fight, the dispenser accidentally blasted a full dose of the virus into Mark's face and immediately stunned the hero. To Oliver's horror, he had unwittingly infected one of the only people he cared about in the universe with the one thing that was sure to kill him. To his great relief, Alan appeared out of nowhere and caught the stunned hero. It only took them a few seconds to realize that the virus had already taken hold inside of Mark, and they raced him off to the only place they knew was isolated enough and had the technology to possibly save him. That was Frag's command carrier, hidden on the dark side of the moon. They then left him in the Viltrumite's care, as they were unwelcome upon the carrier, and awaited on the Earth's surface for news of Mark's conditions. While they waited, Alan and Oliver sought out their wartime ally, Tech Jacket. They found him embroiled in a particularly difficult battle with a powerful alien invader. Despite their near immeasurable raw strength, the three allies found themselves on the losing side of the battle until Atom Eve intervened and neutralized the alien. Eve's appearance was not a coincidence. She had arrived looking for Alan, as he was one of the few beings that knew the location of Dinosaurus's lair. He had gotten the information from Invincible before he succumbed to the virus. Apparently, while Alan, Oliver, and Tech Jacket were battling the alien, Dinosaurus had abducted Mark and left the command carrier. The three aliens, along with Eve and Bulletproof, converged on Dinosaurus's lair and confronted the villain, only to discover that he had been protecting Mark from Frag. With the crisis averted and Mark's seeming return to health, albeit without his powers, Alan and Oliver decided it was time to return to Talescria. The two journeyed home over the next 2 weeks, and upon their arrival, Alan freed Nolan and begged for his forgiveness. When Alan had finished, Oliver did much the same. Mark's near-death had truly shaken him to his core and made him rethink his notion about taking a life. Pleased at his son's epiphany and continued growth, Nolan accepted his apology and left once more for the Earth. Rather than return to the Earth alongside his father, Oliver decided to remain on Talescria and to continue to think about the series of events that had recently concluded. After some time, Oliver would meet a girl named Haluma, an alien with a lobster-like appearance. 6 months after, he would age and don a new appearance, similar to his father's old Coalition outfit. He would arrive to see Mark and Eve with Terra, and he offers to cook dinner for them, with Mark accepting. He arrives to Mark and Eve's to introduce Haluma to them. Mark and Oliver talk about Haluma's appearance, with Oliver commenting on how he saw humans. After dinner is finished, the four of them eat, and Oliver leaves with Haluma. The night after, Oliver and Haluma hear about Terra's condition, concerned on how she's doing. Mark yells at them, demanding to know what Haluma fed them. Haluma argues with Mark, and Oliver breaks them apart until Eve arrives to tell Mark that Terra is fine. After Mark is asked to finish off Frag while he is weakened in his fight with Battle Beast, Oliver joins his side. They never find Frag or Battle Beast in the aftermath of the battle, but Mark and Oliver are informed by a local that Battle Beast's body was burned in a public celebration, implying that Frag was victorious. Later, they return to their spaceship, where they find Space Racer and Thresher floating in a debris field. Oliver and Mark bring them into the ship and put them in medical stasis pods. Thresher breaks out of her pod and goes into a fit of rage over the death of Battle Beast. Mark and Oliver hold her down before Space Racer calms her down. Mark and Oliver meet with Alan about Frag not being found. Then, after learning that Alan's carelessness almost caused Terra's death, Oliver becomes furious at him. Alan invites them all to a movie later that night, and Oliver goes with Haluma. Oliver assures Eve that Terra will like the movie, but later Terra starts crying. Oliver apologizes, and on the next day, he patrols Talescria with Mark. They find an illegal Canslock farm and kill a beast known as a Rhinax. Alan asks Mark and Oliver again to go on a mission to defeat Frag. Oliver is excited about the mission, until Mark reminds him that Frag severely injured him the last time they fought. When they arrive, they discover that Frag has vanished. In shock, they ask the Coalition spy, who does not know where Frag went either. Mark and Oliver split up to search for Frag. Mark wanders into a mysterious cave, and Oliver warns him not to explore it before their radio transmission cuts off. Mark's whereabouts were lost to Oliver afterward, and Mark went missing. Oliver had gone through a traumatic experience while Mark was in a different timeline. When Mark returns to his own timeline, Oliver sees Mark and goes to see what's going on with him. Mark cries and Oliver comforts him. After the party, Oliver goes to his house and sees Haluma taking care of their twin children. He gives her a kiss and goes to the room. He reports to Frag everything that's happening, revealing Oliver's double agent status. Oliver later visits Alan in the hospital and then says goodbye to Mark, who is going back to visit Earth. In the days of Alan's recovery, Oliver reports to him on Frag's activities. Oliver later asks Frag to meet in person. Frag contacts Oliver and asks that he prove his loyalty to the Viltrumite cause. Frag reveals that he and 2 of his children are going to kill Mark and his family. He asks that Oliver do nothing about this, including warning them. Oliver begs Frag to reconsider, suggesting that he could sway them to their cause, but Frag's mind is made up. Frag breaks contact just before Haluma comes in to ask why he was shouting. Oliver later arrives at Mark's house to see Frag threatening Mark's daughter, Terra. Oliver surprises him and tells Terra to find her parents. Frag soon gains the upper hand and Terra tries to stop him, but breaks her leg in the process. A furious Oliver fights back, claiming that Frag really hates the Grayson family because they are the descendants of Argyle, meaning that they are destined to be the leaders Frag never will be. Frag, angered by Oliver's remarks, impales Oliver with his arm, kills him in response. Mark soon arrives and looks at Oliver's body and avenges his brother's death by killing Frag's son. Eve heals Terra's leg and joins Mark in driving Frag and his daughter away, but they are both overpowered and killed by Frag. When Frag leaves, Eve's full powers unlocks in her near-death state, and she heals herself along with Mark. She also tried to heal Oliver, but it turns out that Oliver had already died, and she can't heal a lifeless body, even with her unlocked powers. So yeah, this is how Oliver's story comes to an end in the Invincible universe.